We're ready to start when you're ready. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cabinet Committee Group Company Governance meeting. So the first item on the agenda is notice of recording stroke webcast. So this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Do we have any apologies? And we do have apologies from Councillor Bridget Jones and Councillor Hunt and Councillor, it's the other one that we have apologies for, and that's the only two. And then I'm thanking Councillor Harmer for attending and Councillor Majid or audio the so thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? There are none. So we're on agenda item 4, public notes of the last meeting, the 6th of July 2022. Are the minutes fine? Do we approve them? Colleagues who were there? You wasn't there? Okay, well, I was there. Well, I agree with them then. And then now we have company update, and this is introduced by Alison, who is here virtually, and I'm thanking you for being there because we know that you're a little bit unwell. I mean, obviously, I wasn't concerned about you being unwell, but I'm grateful that you are there, Alison, and not here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Don't make me laugh. No, thank you. So the paper is here for noting, and it gives you all of the updates that have been notified to Companies House by any of our companies or shareholdings since our last meeting. So the changes are there for you at 3.2, and if those are elements that we are aware of and that we're managing where appropriate. At 3.3, it lists all the accounts that have been filed with Companies House by our companies, and we keep a monitor of these during the year and go through all of the audit reports just to make sure there's nothing in there that we need to bring to your attention. The audit reports that are noted on here are clear, they're unqualified, and there's nothing there to bring to your attention. Should there be anything arising between these meetings that does impact the council in any way on its revenue side, then that would go through the normal revenue and budget monitoring reports through to yourself as portfolio holder, Councillor Mosquito, and then through to Cabinet in a public report. There is nothing of that nature to report today. There is a paper on the private committee, which will give you a more in-depth update from some of our companies. And as that contains commercially sensitive information, we retain that on the private agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a report on noting, but it's information. Did you have a question?
No, it's just exercise of the report. The relevant organization referred to as Councillor Mohammed Aklak. He's honorary Mohammed Aklak. He's no longer a councillor. He should be, I'm assuming, Councillor Aklak Ahmed.
Yes, that is correct.
Please check.
Yes. Yes. I noticed Tahir Ali on one report, and he's no longer a councillor. I thought, was I dreaming? Thank you.
An MP.
No. So is this, apart from that, we note the report?
Yeah, no.
Noted, thank you. So we're on item number 6, which is training update. And this is a verbal report from the head of law, commercial, procurement, privacy and information. Connie Price.
Thank you, Chair. We said in September, we said previously that we would wait until the annual appointments have been completed before providing any extensive training for new directors and for those needing a refresher. Georgina and her little team are putting together the names for a training date in late October. And that training will consist of a single session which covers directors' roles and responsibilities, as well as board effectiveness. In this way, individuals only need to attend once. Both are quite meaty sessions, so the challenge, I suppose, will be finding a day that will be suitable for everyone and where, in fact, they can spare 4 or 5 hours. It's difficult, but getting everyone together in one place at one time and providing all the training and the training materials is probably going to be easier than trying to get people back twice. We'll see how that works out. And then we'll have mop-up sessions throughout the year, as we always do, on a one-to-one basis or in small groups. We'll then be dealing with the charity trustee directors separately, just because the rules are different for them. There's a lot of commonality, but essentially they are different things, so we deal with them separately. And then just to recap, the roles and responsibilities training will be provided by the civil service, who have a very good training course that they will tailor to our needs. And then the board effectiveness training by a truly excellent private sector commercial director and lecturer. He lectures for the British Venture Capital and Private Equity Association and a number of other well-established institutions. His training will cover a lot of different areas, but specifically it's asking questions like, what is board performance? Why does it even matter? When is a board not a board? How do you know you're sitting as a director of an effective board? It highlights the importance of knowing when the board sit, whether in fact they're even legally constituted. We started here today by saying, are we board? And something as simple as that, sitting on the board and not knowing that the board is or isn't board, makes the meeting ineffective and decisions invalid, etc. So, basic things like that, and then a lot more. They will get to know how to deal with conflicts of interest, the difference between non-executive directors and directors, practical actions that they can take to improve their own personal performances and the effectiveness of the board as a whole. Well, I won't go on, but there's plenty more. We'll also, this year, in training, both at that time and throughout the year, be focusing on health and safety, GDPR, and environmental protection training, which hasn't really featured very heavily in training previously. It's been touched on, but just learning from experience, it seems, particularly in health and safety, that people need a lot more training. And so effectively, that's the training.
That's good. I look forward to this. So it's venture capital person. That sounds quite exciting. Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just slightly concerned about expecting members to attend a 5-hour training session because I suspect very few will have the flexibility to do that. Usually, most people have they might be able to be free in the morning or the afternoon, but to expect them to take out a full day or 5 hours is especially going to be difficult. I fear that many of our members will not be able to commit to that, so I think it may be better to look at trying to break it up. I appreciate it may be more difficult to organise, but you'll probably find it people are much more willing to commit to that. I certainly could commit to a 5-hour training session because it worked.
Helpful to know. It may be then that I was speaking to the training providers anyway. If they could. If we could get them both into, say, 3.5 hours.
Obviously, that's still verging on the longer side. So.
On the longer side. Okay, we'll work on 2 dates, I think.
And it's best to circulate those dates as far in advance so that people can make arrangements. So there's nothing worse than saying, oh, there's something next week you've got to attend, particularly if you've got to book either annual leave or try and move things around at work or move other meetings, which often people have. The sooner the dates are in, the sooner people can make plans, particularly if as group secretary want to push people to attend this. It's very difficult to do that if they don't have the time to be flexible, and obviously work is going to trump a lot of people.
What about hybrid online trainings that we could, so some of them must have videos that we could watch, 12 o'clock in the night or early in the morning. So now,
Sleep.
sometimes that's the time I get to watch mine. But that could be a possibility for some bits of it, not all of it. So, you know, what's the difference between a non-exec director and a direct? That's something we could. But the other issues now that we may need to have a bit more interaction with the individual would be ones that are not, that would be more difficult, more challenging. But you know, just saying what constitutes a board or what doesn't constitute a board, or what are the key legal things that we have to do, those are fairly simple, I would imagine, that we could just list out and we could watch on a video. But the other bits, I think, would be, because I mean, I'm very keen on financial literacy, but that's something you can't just use through a video. You'd have to have someone asking questions. You know.
But yes, Chair, we can look at the range of different ways of delivering this. The face-to-face tends to work well because of the interactivity. When we start dealing with, for instance, conflicts of interest, which could be covered by both sessions, but in slightly different ways, we find that real examples are helpful. And I don't know if anyone here has attended previous sessions that we've had in the council house, but they become crazily interactive because people are up and getting all their questions out and experiences that they've had and difficulties that they're experiencing. They throw them out there. Online, it's a little more difficult, particularly if you have vast numbers, and we do have a lot of directors.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to support the comments of Councillor Moore. In order to maximise attendance, I think it would be helpful if we broke up into modules so you can have 2 sessions of say 2.5 hours, because you know, members, anyone general public, they tend to switch off after like 2.5, 3 hours. So I think that would be useful. Also to take into account that some members, a lot of them who work, it may be difficult for them to like fit something into the daytime. So if you've got an option for an evening session as well, I think that would be really helpful. So you have 2 sessions. The daytime, 2 in the evening, and then give members the option of, and as long as we have adequate notice, I'm sure we'll be able to get good attendance. And it says in the notes from the previous meeting that it will be pushed by the political groups anyway, so to ensure you get that attendance. I think it's imperative that people have some form of training because they need to understand their responsibilities as directors, the legal responsibilities that they have, which a lot of them probably aren't aware of. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So we'll take that back then.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Sally. Well, thank you for your verbal update. And we're now on Acidico Limited, pen portrait. So it's a report of the Director Group and Capital Finance Deputy Section 151 Officer, Alison Jarrett.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So this paper and the next are the introductions to the next session on the agenda, in the private agenda, where we have our visitors coming. So the first paper is just an outline of Acidico, and it looks at its last reported performance. Its accounts have just been filed, and it shows that turnover increased by 4 million. And whilst there was still a loss of, it was actually 78,000, it was an improved performance on 2021. So Acidico, as I'm sure members know, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the council. It has Acidico Building Consultancy and Acidico Design, Construction and Facilities Management, DCFM. So they attend regularly at this committee, and they're here this afternoon. They'll be looking at their performance and presenting their business plan for the future, and it will be attended by the CEO and the chair of the board. So the paper just outlines some of their main activities.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Just ask in terms of this bit of the agenda, how much of Acidico's work is work for Birmingham City Council? How much is external consultancy?
At the moment, under their technical relations, 80% plus is for the City Council. They are making some really good, and they'll talk to you about it when they come, some expansions into Worcestershire, Gloucestershire, and I think perhaps that's a question that is going to be pertinent on the private agenda, because obviously the amount of expansion that they can do is somewhat constrained by the amount of work they do for the council. But if you're happy to ask that on the private agenda, I think the Chief Exec, I'm sure, would be happy to answer that in more detail.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question. That's for the private session. But on this one, again, Honourable Alderman, former Councillor Mohammed Aklak is shown as the relevant organist chair. Can that be amended to Councillor Aklak comment, please?
Yes.
Apologies.
So is that noted? I forgot to note the previous one. Do I need to say, is that okay? Let me go back to number 6 in terms of noting the report or the verbal report from Connie Price. Is that noted?
No.
Thank you very much. So we now go on to agenda item 8B, music, pen portrait of the music, and it's a report from the Director Group and Capital Finance Deputy Section 151. So introduced by Alison Jarrett.
Thank you. And similarly to the last report, this is a brief outline of the main elements of B Music. They will be attending this afternoon and will be able to, again, to discuss their performance and present their business plans for the coming year. And that will be commercially sensitive, and that will be on the private agenda. So what I set out here for you is their objectives, and I'm sure, as many of you know, they present concert performances of all sorts of styles, both at the Symphony Hall and at the Town Hall. They receive a grant from the City Council, and I set out there for you this year's grant and next year's grant. They're currently in the last year of a 3-year confirmed settlement. So when the budget was set for 2021, the figures were set for 3 years. And again, as we move into the budget process for 23-24, that is it will be up for consideration again, and that will go through the standard budget process starting very shortly. So as you'll know, during COVID, the venues were closed. They have now opened, and I read in the press and I understand that they're having some really great audiences through the doors now, but they did have to reduce some of their staffing during that period, and they were able to take advantage of the furlough scheme to protect many of the jobs, but they did make some redundancies. So it's still one of the world's leading concert halls. They completed last year the new and making an entrance capital scheme, and that had funding raised from Arts Council, from GBS LEP, and the council underwrote some of it with a loan. Not all of it was fully drawn down. They didn't require all of it, as their fundraising went particularly well. And again, we have I believe Nick Reed, the CEO, coming to meet with you on the private agenda.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much for that. Do we note this report? Thank you very much. So we're now on number 9, date of the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 17th of November, 2022 at 2 p.m. Is that okay with everyone so far? Any other urgent business? So I now move the exclusion of the public. At this point, we're going to ask for live stream to restart.